Hello and welcome back to another episode of This Round is on Me. The guest of my show today is a man who wears many hats, literally and figuratively. Prabir Jha is a human resources strategist with diverse industry experience from the civil service to engineering, IT, pharmaceuticals, automotive, retail, media, telecom, and digital services. He's been the CHRO of 2 New York Stock Exchange listed companies as well as 2 Fortune 500 companies. He's a LinkedIn power profile, a TEDx speaker, columnist, and an active tweeter. And presently, he runs his own advisory for startups and large corporations on all things related to HR. You know, many of the entrepreneurs I've spoken to over the years of doing this podcast have all stated one thing that continues to be one of their biggest challenges: building and retaining a great team. I know I have so many questions when it comes to my own organization, so I can't wait to dive in with Prabir right after this quick break.
Hey, what a great week it has been on the IVM Podcast Network. We have a special announcement introducing Club Paisa Vaisa, where you get episodes of Paisa Vaisa 3 days before release, bonus and ad-free content, and access to the full show archive. So get your yearly membership today for only rupees 699. Log on to club.ivmpodcasts.com/paisavaisa. On Cock and Bull, Shad and Nivedita joined Cyrus to discuss AI-generated couple artworks that went viral on the internet. On page 10, Jalasmi, Meghnad, Snehil and me discuss the Haldwani demolition row, China's space plans, Rishabh Pant's injury and more. Find the episode on the All About Now channel. On Anish Thing, Anish is joined by his mother Anita Bhasin, who is a multimodal therapist. They talk about a combination of hypnosis, past life regressions, and a lot more. And on Shunya One, Sheila Aditya is joined by Saurabh Agarwal, founder and CEO of Resha Mandi. They talk about digitizing the natural fiber supply chain. And once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcast.com. We have some really exciting stuff for you over there. Follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our show, spread the word. Tell your friends and don't forget to rate and review them wherever you're listening to them. You'll also find our shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Capgemini and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you for making this possible.
Welcome to the show, Prabir. It's so fabulous having you here. I know we've been trying to get together for a while, so we finally made it happen.
Delighted to be here and delighted to kind of sit in such a lovely studio with someone as bright as you.
Thank
so shoot
you.
all your questions.
Yes, I can't wait to get started. I think it's fair to say that COVID has changed the employer-employee dynamic quite, drastically, and that relationship has sort of changed forever. I think it's fair to say that, when you hear terms like quiet quitting and moonlighting and, whatnot, which work from home and hybrid and all these things which have now become sort of very common nomenclature for the work situation and become hot topics. But, to many small, medium businesses like my own, a lot of these are not really relevant, right? I mean, they're not something that we're facing on a day-to-day basis. These may be applicable to larger organizations. But let's just take a step back and, start at the beginning. Going back to my original challenge, I guess, and what I mentioned is, a problem for many small businesses is how do you build a great team?
It's a brilliant question. It sounds so simple. But, Gauri, the important thing first is to be clear, why do you need a team? Many a time we assemble people without really knowing what is the team going to deliver. And it's very, very mission critical, because is it only assembling for a certain task and then to be disbanded? Or you are building a team as a seminal start to a grand purpose, to an aspiration? Because a lot of what that team will do and who the team will be will depend on this very, very crucial view that you take about what is the team coming together for. And but in a business context, you definitely start by delivering the here and now. But you never, ever should forget the there and then. Because before you realize businesses possibly can grow bigger, right? And is this team the team that can accomplish the there and then? or will you replace the team? And therefore, the dynamics of team design, team composition flows from here. So that's the first comment that I would have. So very clearly, once you're clear about the purpose, the tenure, the vision that you have this team to accomplish, it is to get the right set of skill sets together. And these are functional skill sets to begin with. But is skills enough? If you just hire the top 10, 11 people who are the best functionally, does that mean that they have moved from being individual superstars to being a cohesive team? The answer is no. And therefore, team building, and I'm trying to avoid all our HR jargon, right? Because there are things about, storming and norming and forming and the journey towards, when a team really moves from being a group of people to a team. I think there are many things that you do which are very simple. I personally believe you should ask yourself, is your team adequately plural? If everyone thinks and behaves the same way, possibly you'll miss many opportunities. There'll be blind spots. So there should be plurality in strengths, plurality in thinking, plurality in experiences. I, for one, I would like to believe, some of the finest HR teams in this part of the world. And not everyone has been an HR person. I brought R&D scientists, I brought salespeople, I've got medical doctors into HR, right? Because it gets a perspective which otherwise I would not have had.
But you're in HR, and I think that may be something that you're doing consciously. But for someone like me, just speaking now from my experience, I'm listening to what you're saying and thinking about myself. Don't you tend to hire people who think a lot like you and have a very similar...
And you're right. And that is why I'm cautioning.
Yeah.
And that's why I use the word plurality. Because tendency of most people is to hire people who look like them, speak like them, behave like them, talk like them, right? I don't think that's the smartest way of building a team. Because even any strength that you have, overdone can be a weakness. And a team must collectively bring everything that is needed to execute the purpose and the mission that the team has been set out for. So plurality is important. Therefore, the mix of skill sets is very important. I mean, imagine if in a game of cricket everyone was just a batsman. You don't make teams like that, right? So that's the context. I also believe that a lot of it depends about the level of alignment in teams. One of the big reasons why great teams don't deliver great results is they are not adequately aligned. Do people understand who is supposed to do what, with whom, by when, in collaboration with? And it sounds very simple, but you'll be surprised it doesn't happen. I'm sure in your kitchens you'll have some of these issues.
Everything you're saying, I can think of like so many examples where you're absolutely right. And it seems so obvious.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to actually implement.
Because all of this, if we were to unpeel the onion, is a lot of hard work, particularly of the team leader. Because we are always on the treadmill. We never stop and pause to ask these questions. Are they pulling in the same direction? What could I do? So I'll just build on some more smattering of these things. Third is trust. Do people trust each other? They may be all qualified. They may have come with the right intention. They mean well, but do they trust each other? Often they don't. And I have found this to be one of the biggest challenges in any corporation I've worked in or in any client that I have been helping with. Trust. How do you build a sense of trust? Which means an issue of communication. I mean, do you communicate to your people or communicate with your people? Do you encourage people to communicate laterally, or everything needs to go to the boss, and boss is the clearing agent? Great teams aren't created or designed by moving things up. So free conversation, the ability to discuss things across the table. I think it sounds very simple, but it doesn't happen, right? At the end of the day, we are all clouded by our own persona, and we judge everyone. Great teams don't judge, they empathize, right? So if Gauri is saying this, maybe she's coming from a point of view which I am not fully cognizant of. So I think it takes a lot of hand-holding, appreciation. Do a lot more of collective appreciation. A lot of teams don't become great teams because individuals get celebrated. Teams don't get celebrated. And I always tell people that, at the end of the day, great team failures also must be opportunities of celebration. What do we learn together rather than blaming X, Y, and Z? I'm not saying that don't do your dissection, but ultimately we win together, we lose together. So it all sounds very intuitive, But the challenge is, how do you create a culture, a team culture that brings all of this together? And that is where most organizations, most team leaders and most teams falter, because my thesis is most organizations are led by left-brained people, right? They understand the left side, the bread and butter, the black and white very clearly. But great teams are born through grey, through experiences, through ambiguity, through moments of truth. And I don't think there's enough of awareness, support, hand-holding, including of the team leader. The team leader may be meaning well, but may be shortchanged to be able to do all the things that I mentioned. And this is what I think are small building blocks, but almost non-negotiables of building great teams.
Everything you're saying, I'm like, I completely resonate. And just speaking from personal experience, I've seen how I've evolved as a team leader over the last sort of 12 years of running my own business. And, just a few small things, like recently putting in place a mechanism where we get together, at least the senior people get together, and it's a non-negotiable weekly meeting that happens. And the idea is that everyone speaks openly, communicates. They have issues with each other or with something, the way it's being done, whatever. Speak up. When you leave the room, everyone's still friends. There's no, or colleagues, there's nothing personal, because a lot of the time I see, and you mentioned trust, but I see a lot of issues coming out of ego getting in the way of, of the objective, which, you said needs to be defined very clearly in the beginning, or identified at least by the team leader, and then, shared with the others. But I think the sometimes we lose sight of that, why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, and we make it about ourselves.
Yes.
And that's when a lot of dynamics
but don't
go
celebrate prima donnas. I think it happens in mature organizations. Some functions are seen to be more privileged. Sales, because we get in the money. Yes, you get in the money, but you get in the money only because so many people who are unsung enable you to get that money, right? And I think it's very important to celebrate the entire team collectively. And these are small little things, but cultures get ossified very quickly. And it's very important to keep asking yourself, is the team therefore serving the purpose for which it came together? Is it still a team? Is the culture of the team needing some refinement? Maybe sometimes you renovate team cultures, right? Because, at the end of the day, the last part is, I believe very strongly that at the end of the day, it's very important for everyone to believe that they are in there for a bigger game, a bigger purpose. And, I have, in my random walk-arounds in my executive life and now as an advisor to companies, I would go to, let us say, a receptionist and say, tell me, how do you add value to the organization? What is the organization's purpose that you're serving? And most of the time they don't know, and it's a shame, because the fact is, you are the first person maybe I see when I come to a company. You are the company, right? But no one has ever made this person feel that your role is so critical, the way you pick up the phone. Now, of course, it's the world of mobiles. You don't need to go through operators, etc. But these are very important roles, or the person who is cleaning your washrooms or making sure the office looks nice. They aren't ever acknowledged. I mean, even senior managers walk across without even saying, thank you, you did a great job. So their involvement and sense of belief as being a member of a team gets compromised, because then for them, the team is some high-profile people or high-profile functions and not us. And that's where, you start the first signs of, a frayed team behavior. And that's where it starts developing into fault lines.
I have a lot of follow-up questions to that. But, you mentioned culture, right? And that's a big word. It's something that I know I've grappled a lot with trying to put it in place. And I've heard about people, organizations have this culture document and, the 5 sort of things that are most important. And, just it feels like this very important corporate task that, we all need to sort of think about and put in place. But just sort of taking a step back again, I've seen, obviously, growing up, how my parents' generation used to, stay in jobs for years till retirement, right? A lot of them from the time they graduated stayed with the same company
Correct.
till, retirement, and they were celebrated when they left and, things like that. I mean, I know personally, I stayed with, one of the big four accounting firms that I was with for 9 years. Like, I didn't have a reason to leave. I had a great career progression. I enjoyed the sort of work I was doing, the people I was working with. I see a completely different situation today. We all talk about Gen Z and millennials and all of that, but I don't think it's fair to, to categorize a generation completely. I think it's just that the environment has changed. What has changed?
So you have many questions in your observation, and they are all perfect observations. So let me break it up. I'll come to culture later. Let me share with you my perspective of what's really happening as far as employee loyalty and, more importantly, employee commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Because, see, when I speak to entrepreneurs, promoters, CEOs, for them, employee loyalty is about tenure. Oh, the guy left in 1 year, the guy left in 3 years, the guy left in 10 years.
I mean, you look at a CV and you see when someone's jumped a lot of jobs, you're like, that's no good.
Yeah. So many people have this unconscious bias. And, part of my effort of educating many promoters is this, that because for you it is one company that you were born to or you created and you served with, is not to believe that that's the only thing that people do. And the more promising people don't want to get tethered to just one role. I've also heard people who've been in with one company saying, no, but Prabir, I moved around different roles. I always felt. I personally don't buy that argument, because you start gaming the system. Politically, you start gaming the system. You develop your political affiliations. That's how big corporations work, right? And yes, of course, you learn something different in a different role. I won't deny that. But ultimately, it is about feeling safe, feeling assured. And in many ways, it inherits the good and the bad of what was my first job, the great bureaucracy, right? So I personally feel that is more an answer of convenience. Today, I think and somewhere in your question you made that comment, today people are spoiled for choice. My expression, in fact, I've been talking about it, see, maybe a generation earlier, people did not have much of a choice. So it was corporate monogamy. They joined one company, they ended with that one company. Not that they did not want to explore opportunities. There weren't opportunities. There weren't too many people. What kind of jobs do you go to? Now, as the economy has kind of blossomed and mushroomed, so many opportunities, so many lines of work, so many competing opportunities, people are spoiled for choice. And therefore, from corporate monogamy, they move to corporate polygamy. So a person may do 5 jobs in a lifetime of a career, which is fine. Actually, we've gone a step further with the gig concept. I call it corporate polyandry. Right? So you see from a very sociological interpretation to jobs how the world has changed. Today, someone is saying, I want to work with 5 clients at the same time. Maybe I'm an example of that. I don't want to be captive to one company, whatever the money and the title. I want to serve 5 companies at the same time because I learn that much more. I like variety. Someone might choose to still be in corporate monogamy mode because that is how the person is made. And there are no stereotypes, which you've rightly said. But this is the context of why the trends have changed the way they have. The second is, a lot of it is to do with labor economics. So there are these moments of peaks and the troughs. So suddenly everyone is wanting to hire more and more people for the same skill set. And therefore you have this great resignation drama. And then you suddenly realize you've hired more people than what the business is capable of servicing. And then you do all this quiet quitting and, mass firing and layoffs and all that. So, it's part of that yo-yo, which is not great. But the reality is that it's not just the money that draws people away into doing many jobs and therefore employee loyalty in tenure basis, but a lot about the push. I personally believe that trust levels in most companies have taken a big beating in the last some years. Most managers have got to levels of positions that I don't think they are ready for. Because the wave got built, everyone got promoted for retention reasons. but companies have not invested in really making them effective managers. There are exceptions who are great managers because they are great managers, but most of them have not been trained enough to be great managers.
Prematurely.
And therefore, who is the company? The company is not, let us say, you as the promoter. How many people will meet you? But the company is the manager they work with. And I think there's an issue there. The person's style of leadership, the person's lack of appreciation, the person's micromanagement, the inability to let go, blah, 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 blah. So I think all of that is leading people to explore opportunities, and the world has enough to offer. So it becomes a very convenient issue. It's like our household staff. You don't like them, they can leave you and go to the neighbor. And this is how the world is, because everyone lives in a flat today. You don't have to walk 10 miles to look for a job. So this is the issue about why employee loyalty and tenure. But I'll end before I come to culture. I believe, and I've written a lot about this subject, employee loyalty is a misplaced expression. We should not talk about employee loyalty. I personally believe, is there employee commitment? I may be with you for 2 years, but I may do something which is almost 10 years impact. I don't want to be notionally in a company for 30 years, plodding along, surviving, keeping my head hidden. And that is why there are companies which are struggling with satisfactory underperformance. So when you start measuring employee contribution in terms of tenure, you're creating mediocrity by default. For me, I have had people who have in my own team, and I've said very bright people, that, now you guys should look for working with someone beyond Prabir, because there's nothing else you will learn from Prabir. But I'll be honest, there are very few leaders who think like this, because the mindset is still, let me hoard that talent. But the talent has different aspirations of their own, right? And I think, therefore, the trick is to make sure that you look at it as a funnel. You'll always have some stock of talent coming in, because some stock of talent will and should, in my view, go out. Because the reality of organizations is it's a pyramid, even if you are expanding and growing. So you may have greater opportunities for more people, but still it will be a pyramid. You can't have 25 people at the top, right?
Yeah.
So I think it is wise to think about it that way, and make sure that your talent thinking is such that the best guys actually go up. And to that extent, I like the army. It is tough to get to senior levels, right? And not be like the bureaucracy where everyone finally gets the pay grade and the title, right? So I think we should be talking more about employee commitment, employee impact, rather than employee loyalty, because employee loyalty is a very passive and a very convenient expression. So I don't personally like that.
Yeah, I think when I was talking about loyalty, I didn't mean just that you stick around, as long as possible. I think, of course, your contribution has to be valued, but very important. What you're saying, because I think it's really important for leaders to continuously groom people, so that you're not in this situation where you expect or you feel betrayed when there isn't this commitment or loyalty, as I've been loosely using the word, right? So you can let go of people graciously and happily, because you have continued to build, like you said, in the pyramid. Yeah.
Actually, you used a lovely word, graciously. At the end of the day, you don't have to carry everyone till their retirement. Why should that be your obligation? I don't think that should be the obligation of any employer. But can you be honest with them? Can you give them feedback in time, ahead of time? Can you say that if you don't kind of meet these kind of expectations or thresholds, then maybe a year later, 2 years later, you may not be able to grow. And the fact is, sometimes you say, okay, let the guy plateau at a certain level. I'm a hawk here, right? I don't think that's smart thinking. Because the price you pay for a plateaued employee actually becomes 3x even before you realize. So it's better to allow the guy to leave, but do it graciously, so the guy goes as a great brand ambassador and plays to his or her strengths in another organization where it actually benefits him and the organization. Yeah. So, there is nothing that, a person, maybe he's not good enough for me, but for some smaller company, he might still be a great star.
So I agree with that. But and I've written about this on my LinkedIn as well, where I've had experiences where people, you would like to do that as
Yes.
a team leader.
Yeah.
But people are often not honest about why they're leaving or where they're
Yes.
leaving. And I actually, initially I put it down to the person and their sort of inability to be, honest. But I sort of on reflection feel like it's something that we might be doing incorrectly, or as an organization or a culture, that people don't feel that they
Yes.
can, sort of
Share.
cut the cord and move on and say why they're doing it in an honest manner.
So I know of one company, I have worked in that company, where everyone would say, my father is very unwell.
Yeah, the grandfather who died
Grandfather is
3
died
times
or
over.
something,
Yeah.
So the fact is, it is for the organization to be honest and reflect, why is it that people are not being honest? There will always be some people who will be dishonest on the other side. Let me share with you my own experience, except for one particular experience. I've always said where I'm going next. And most people would do that. But certain companies have built that reputation because either they'll torpedo your other offer or they'll kind of play dirty. So people, and that's why I raised this issue of trust. But maybe that's a good segue for me to talk about culture.
Yeah.
Right? I personally think culture is possibly the most crucial ingredient in organization building today. And organizations of future will need to think a lot more seriously than they've done. It's a favorite subject of mine, so I will hold my enthusiasm back
I'm
so that we
listening
can take.
with full ears open.
We can. So let me tell you, in very simple terms, I like to define culture in my own way. I say culture is the way people think, behave, relate, perform and deliver a product, service or experience. But it starts from the mind. How do they think? So if 5 individuals think in a certain way, culture gets formed somewhere in their mind itself. And then, of course, behavior and delivery and execution. I never believe that there is a good culture or a bad culture. Many a time we say, it's a good culture company, it's a bad culture company. I mean, in my own reflection, I don't think, who am I to say it's good or bad? Because I see it from my prism. And each one would see culture from their lens only. For me, the question to ask, Gauri, is your culture aligned to the strategy of your business? And your strategy could be very different than my strategy. So, for example, you may want to have a very nice, cuddly, low tolerance, long tenure mindset as a culture. And it works for you. No problem at all. I may be very high impact, high here and now, high merit. You use whatever words you want. But these are choices of culture. You cannot be this and that all the time. Once you are clear, because many a time people feel culture is all about the soft, cuddly things. It's not always about that. It is about that, but it's more than that. For example, a culture of accountability, a culture of entrepreneurial thinking and doing.
But isn't that common across? I mean, isn't every organization
It is
doesn't
not.
want?
It is not. This is the challenge. This is the challenge. See, sometimes you may have thought about it in a certain way, but that's not how your metaphors of culture express themselves. So let us say, yes, everyone is in the business of making money. But is every organization culturally entrepreneurial? The answer is no. Is every organization culturally respectful of people? The answer is no.
They may not be, but wouldn't that be the goal for most organizations?
So, stated cultural intent, important, but inadequate. What you hang on your walls, what you tell in your PPTs actually mean nothing. So, if I'm waiting to meet you outside your office and you make me wait for an hour and a half, speaks to me about the culture of this company more than what your board say. And you'll be surprised whether it's an employee or it's a consumer, it's a stakeholder, it's a supplier. They experience the company in the way they only know. And that is culture. Right? Now, if 10 people experience you in a certain way, then your reputation of a cultural attribute becomes magnified. So it doesn't matter what you clarify and explain and reason and deny. It doesn't matter. And that is why, as someone who's been in the business of talent, hiring, and, I have told a lot of my companies in the past, and I advise a lot of clients, that it doesn't matter. I can be the best headhunter you can get for the job. But if, let us say, Gauri, you've been in this company and the person I'm speaking to, he recalls you as having worked in this company. In today's world, everyone is connected. He or she will call you and say, hey, what was your experience? And if your experience was bad, I can do what I can to sell the job. It doesn't work. So I think culture is very important, not only from a talent draw perspective, but more importantly of how do things get done in an organization. So example, accountability I used very deliberately because I think many, many companies struggle with accountability as a cultural metaphor. They are nice companies, very cuddly companies. So from a very theoretical culture recall, it will be nice companies. Achhi jagah hai. But the fact is there's no accountability. Decision making is not agile. It is so bureaucratic. And you'll be surprised. Many people think of culture as very fuzzy. But some bit of that culture is fuzzy because it's behavior. A lot of artifacts of culture are hard. For example, I was working with a client and I asked the client that they said, we want to be an innovation-centered culture. And I said, okay, do you must be doing recognition every year? Yes, we do. So I said, in the last 5 years, tell me one failure that you celebrated in your awards night. And the person said, none. Happens with many companies. Stop dreaming about being innovation-centered because you haven't even started celebrating. Or another organization has 15 levels of hierarchy. And you want to be a very agile culture. You can never be an agile culture because you're too laddered and tiered to kind of bring speed and agility. So there's a hard dimension of culture. There's a soft expression of culture. And both put together create the experience of a product, service, if you're a supplier, your payments or whatever else. And that is something that people need to think about because you need to address both. It's not just a soft thing. Every business process, every people process, needs to be, that's what I do in a lot of my advising work. I'll say, my God, if it's a 10-page HR policy, throw it out of the window. Because it's all about thou shalt not. In today's world, where you should be more enabling in tone, right? No, we don't trust. Then you don't say that we are a trusting culture because everything the Sethji wants to see finally before approving. Then the kind of talent such cultures will attract and keep will be very different from the kind of talent that they are wanting to attract. So if you want to attract people like me, you've got to trust and empower and get out of the way. So you see how the entire interplay is happening. So if you hire the best talent, quote unquote, for the wrong culture, and there is attrition in quicker time, you wonder, is it an issue of employee loyalty? You see, this is how it strategically gets very interconnected. And therefore, your questions are so brilliant because it's a very deep issue which is plaguing so many organizations. But no one wants to step back and dispassionately accept, I think we need to kind of reconnect the dots than the way it's happening today.
I think, firstly, identifying what it is that is your culture, and then walking the talk is what, it seems to be is the...
And what's the culture which will get you best to your strategic outcome? So no good or bad. But the fact is, to me, culture and strategy are two sides of the same coin. Culture is an issue of strategy. It is not an issue of execution. And when you discuss strategy of an organization, I ask my clients, when was the last board offsite which discussed culture? Never. Because most of them are left-brain guys. They don't understand culture, right? So that itself becomes a constraint to the way organizations get morphed and created for tomorrow. And then they'll say, oh, but why did we go wrong? Because you never thought about some things at the time that you should have thought. And to me, it's a very, very exciting area of strategic.
But when is that time?
I think from the beginning.
Right.
I'll give you a small anecdote, and that might, don't ask me for more names, but it was one of the most celebrated startups in its times and run by two people who also had the same surname. And I remember talking to them many years ago, and they asked me about some advice, some counsel. I said, the only thing you should be very crystal clear is about the culture you will be. Because you are attracting talent all the way from Silicon Valley to all variety of Indian companies. There's nothing good or bad about any of the people and their backgrounds. But you have to make a choice. Will you be the United States of America as culture, a melting pot? Or will you be like the army, that this is my culture, and tell that upfront to everyone you interview so they can also self-assess, is this the place that they will enjoy working with, or they will deselect? But you're not thinking through about all that, because every technology, every other system you can change tomorrow. Culture renovation is very tough. I mean, I do it for a living, right? That's what I do with most of my clients. But it is tough because it's almost
old habits.
Old habits that you've got to at a mass level that you need to change.
And what I'm seeing, again with regard to our organization, is that as it's growing, by maybe not identifying this culture or being able to, express it, it's getting harder as the organization grows, because you don't have that sort of grounding, sort of foundation in a way.
But ask your people in Hindi, Marathi, whatever it is, use one word or two words to express kis tarah ka ye jagah hai, workplace. In their own ways, they'll express it. Then you try to play it back and say, this is what people seem to, so are people excited? Are they happy? And if they are excited and happy, but is it then linked directionally to your strategy? So it might be a lovely, cuddly place, but guys, we are kind of struggling. We've lost our way. Then you need to rewire. And I think rewiring needs inclusion, communication. I've just written an article that at the end of the day, part of great leadership is the ability to be a great storyteller. And a lot of your history and experience will have anecdotes and stories that support the culture that you need to be. But it's hard work. You need to think. Unfortunately, the left-brained bias of leadership gets you quick wins, gets you your financial numbers in the short term, but they don't necessarily build institutions. And I think that's the struggle that I find with many, many people that I talk to or I help. And that needs to be sorted, because it's a fundamental coaching agenda for otherwise very brilliant people.
Very important words, and lots for even me to think about. Tell me something, sort of just holding on to this idea of culture a little bit as well. In an organization like ours, where we have people, we have a whole host of people from different backgrounds, different education levels. How do you kind of bind people? I mean, I'm hearing that culture is a big part of it, and, that's something that people feel connected on and have a common purpose. But beyond that, in the sort of day-to-day, say something like an offsite, right? I mean, it's something that we sometimes have struggled with, where, a large percentage of people want to do a certain thing and celebrate in a certain way and let their hair down, and they don't want the bosses around. They don't want, they sort of don't feel comfortable maybe. And, and then there's part of the organization that doesn't want to do that, or the women and the sort of male part and all of that. Just how do you kind of, as you're growing as a team, how do you kind of still retain that connect and that I guess togetherness?
So first is to de-jargonize and de-intellectualize this entire engagement, the entire culture of building exercise. Break it down to simple things. LCM, good old mathematics fundamentals, works best. Pick something which cuts across all demographic slices. Start from the basics, right? Speak in a language which everyone will understand. Speak using metaphors and idioms that everyone can relate to. There is no point talking atomic energy with culinary, cooks. It will not work, right? So do that. Second is, remember, it's a journey. When you look at this as a one-off, you will feel the struggle. When you see this as a start point, you will not feel as pained. So you start with something. Not everything will go right, but you would have got 40% hit rate. Next time when you do, you build on this 40%. And therefore, 3 years later, 4 years later, you would have got to a point where people will say, in my organization, this is how we let's say, celebrate, since you use the word celebrate. And you must celebrate in a manner that most people enjoy. There's no point saying we'll uncork champagne bottles when everyone is a teetotaler. I mean, it's stupid. It doesn't make sense. And you apply this on a global scale, it's the same issues. National cultures have their own implications and risks when you are working in a cross-border kind of a thing. So it's the same issue. So do small things. I personally believe do small things more frequently. I'm not saying you shouldn't do big things. I like the ceremony and the inclusion and the oomph of such big events. But I like small things. So if you were to, let us say, celebrate certain behavior, let's say even collaboration across all demographic slices. Pick the 10 groups or 10 people who actually did this. He learnt a different language, or he went and spent time in another part of the organization beyond his regular job. See, what people understand, Gauri, are illustrations. And illustrations celebrated more real time. Call it out quickly. Don't wait for the year end, right? Go to those 10 people and call them and say, I just want to celebrate Prabir because, it was so nice. He went and he doesn't understand a word of Tamil, but he went and worked with my cooks on the cuisine, and he's picked up. So the message is this company appreciates,
encourages.
Because, your cues, your verbal, non-verbal cues are interpreted and received million times over than what you think they are. And every manager of yours must understand the same thing. So as long as you're clear about you're celebrating all the things which are building a kind of culture and connect, which is conducive to your strategy, do that. And things which you want to change, which you might have lived with so far, but now you want to change, start reprimanding those decisions. Because if you people are not sensing it, they will never change themselves. And it needs consistency. So it's hard work. If managers and leaders and entrepreneurs think, it can be left to someone in HR to do, I'm sorry, that's your job. HR can help you, advise you, can do a little more of evangelizing. So I think this will be my suggestion of how small ways, done more frequently, reinforcing certain patterns of behavior, I think creates the kind of culture reinforcement that you need.
Makes complete sense. I'm going to sort of digress a little bit and, again, pick on something that you mentioned earlier, which is trust. So again, using our organization as a reference, this whole idea of work from home, right, which became commonplace during COVID. And a lot of organizations, are not okay with the idea of it because out of sight, don't know what's going on, right? And it, I think, again, comes back to trust.
Yes.
Is that a fair concern to have? I mean, is there some reason why there's this sort of level of mistrust that there is between, employer-employee or between sort of team members? Does it stem from something that is fair or real?
Okay.
Or is it just something that we have to learn to let go and adapt to a new normal?
So let me give you first an MBA caveat. It depends, right?
Fair.
It depends. Because it depends on the sector, the industry, the company. Some jobs lend themselves to, work from home more naturally. You talked about it in your own organization. What will a chef do working from home?
Yeah. So obviously that doesn't apply. Or like airlines, right?
Correct,
you can't work from home. You have to be on the plane.
So those jobs which could possibly work from home, should it or should it not, and how much? Now, I hear this from two very differing schools of thought all the time. Even at home, my children who work with law firms, they are very strong work from home advocates. Like my son says that why should I waste 4 hours in a day commuting in Mumbai when I can use that time to actually use my brains? That's really the intellect that I'm exercising. It makes no difference whether I am in my workplace or this, because there also I'll sit on a laptop. It also depends on individuals. Those who are naturally more extroverted, they seek more work from office reality because there's some socializing and that's the need. Introverts don't miss it as much. Now the question is, what should organizations do? So individuals, they are right from their own point of view. It is less expensive. It's better use of time. You give them, they gain a sense of flexibility. All those are good things. What should organizations do, particularly with issues of trust? Trust is a concern. But let's also be honest. Has it got overly exaggerated? See, when you talk about, even in the context of when moonlighting got reported, and I was on television talking about a few IT companies where it was reported, and I don't want to get into full-fledged moonlighting at this point, but the fact is, how many people out of how many lakhs of IT professionals were actually moonlighting? Notional, right? Settle those issues in the manner that you need to settle. Should you throw the baby out with the bathwater? Not sure. It is a very, very exaggerated knee-jerk response. I would wait and watch. That's the first part. Second, to employees in general, however, the fact is you've got to call out the wrong fish in your pond, because you will forfeit many benefits because some of your colleagues are not behaving right and you're being quiet about it. And silence is acquiescence. So I think that's also feedback for them. So there is an issue of trust, but trust in general, as I said in the beginning of our talk, has been discounted over the last some years, because when you need people, you lay out the red carpet. When you don't need, you just, which is in our context in India with low social security benefits, is a little harsh.
It works both ways.
It works both ways. And therefore, when employees become more mercenary, we also have to realize we've created that situation for them to be mercenary, right? So I think that a work from home will have to be, the reality of hybrid, I believe, is here to stay. Now, whether it will mean by days, by hours, flexibility of daily hours, which jobs, which cities, in Mumbai, I personally believe it makes a lot of sense. Would it be just the same in back home in Patna? I don't know, because, it's a smaller place. You can still commute, especially with families who have increasingly lesser support from the larger family. It's a tougher life, right? So I think it's important. So some flexibility is, I definitely believe, what is important. But it is also very important that it takes two to tango. If employees misuse the faith and trust and leeway that they get, organizations have a right to clamp down. But is the clamp down because it's an exaggeration of some exceptions, or is it commonplace? That's a call that one must take, because I, for one, have always maintained we should not be a very policy-rich company. We should be a practice-rich company. Every policy will have exceptions, and every exception should be treated as an exception. You don't write policies for exceptions, and which is what I see in many, many companies, that, don't go after exceptions. Good or bad, there will always be a need for exception. Otherwise, we'll be all robotized. So trust, yes, right now is an issue, but I don't think the answer is in either extreme.
Yeah, I think, it's that flexibility that you've talked about is really important. But, within finding a balance of what actually is required by the organization.
So let's share with our audience, the choice you gave me. It's an issue of choice, and giving choice is smart management thinking. You gave me a choice. You said, Prabir, we can do this conversation over Zoom and record it. Remember?
Yeah.
Or you can come into a studio and we can talk across the table. When you give me a choice and I exercise the choice, now I own this decision. So similarly in organizations, try and give people choice. At the end of the day, if it's not very difficult, giving people choices. And I, for one, believe that, I've talked a lot about this. Ideally, and for a moment, forget exaggerating the implications, can you atomize experiences and policies for individuals? And for the simple logic, what tickles me may not tickle you. What works for me does not work for you. Overly singular policy avalanche creates huge issues, because at the end of the day, it's neither imaginative, and that's what is happening in companies today. When I did maternity leave for 6 months, about 13, 14 years ago,
wow.
No MNC had also thought about 6 months maternity leave. Today it's law. Now someone says, okay, I'll give you 6 months and 1 week extra. Or when I did bereavement policy, again, I'm talking 10 years ago, no one was talking about bereavement. The question is, does it matter to the demographics of your workforce? But today what is happening is everyone is cloning each other's policy. It's like the campus placement season. Oh, last PlaceCom did it in next number of days. I did it 1 day earlier. It is bizarre. And it's foolish in my mind. So the question is, do what makes sense, but use the principle of atomizing, giving flexibility, because, and you said that yourself earlier in the talk, and you're so right, I have never believed stereotyping people as Gen Z or millennials is the answer. I mean, a millennial in New York may be a little similar to a millennial in Mumbai, but would he be similar to a millennial in Belgaum? I'm not too sure. So, there is a lot of exaggeration of stereotypes, and companies and organizations should be a little cognizant of it, because people respond for their reasons and their unique experiences, their unique backgrounds, their unique situations. And to the extent companies can be a little flexible, it will build greater respect and commitment.
It could actually be in your interest rather than the...
That's right.
Than seeing that it's only in the interest of
Absolutely.
the employee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting. And I think it takes a lot of... it will take rewiring for, the leadership to start thinking about it from a different perspective and seeing the advantage in it for themselves, if that's what...
I've also used this line many a time, and I'll repeat it again here, Gauri. I feel that Papa does not know best anymore. I mean, it's too much. I mean, how can I decide for someone who is many levels below me, many years younger than me, what is good for him or her? I mean, I've worked in organizations where I went in and they said, okay, this kind of a car, only this level can drive. It's that guy's money. How does it matter if the younger guy wants to drive a bigger car and you want to drive a smaller car? It's okay. It's his money. You don't spend more money for that guy, but you allow that guy to use his compensation mix in a manner where for him driving...
That works for him, basically.
A bigger car is good, because at that stage he wants to take his girlfriend out for a spin. And what's your problem? So, many a time people, or when I was in my younger years growing up, we had superannuation as an element in compensation. Oh, it'll give you 15% return, and when you retire. Who are you to decide about my retirement planning? Maybe I'll invest in the share market and get a 30% return. So these are very warped, but many organizations still believe that they will decide for the people for whom, therefore, you're not in the best position to decide.
So, we sort of have figured out a route to creating or understanding the culture and setting a culture in an organization, understanding that everyone's different and you might have to tailor it to individuals rather than have blanket, unflexible policies or inflexible policies. What is it that I obviously am very much jaded with my employer hat on, but what do you think for an employee is really, in terms of priority, what is important to them? Is it that flexibility? Is it, at the end of the day, does it finally only come down to numbers, which is what you find most review conversations as well revolving around? What is it that really it boils down to at the end of the day? And before the recording, we were having this conversation even in terms of, like our domestic help.
Correct.
And I think that's such an interesting analogy that, yes, they can get, a sort of increase going to the neighbor, like you mentioned, but what is it that actually makes them stay?
So it's a question which we can talk till the cows come home. I don't think that for any individual there is only one factor which drives his or her decision making right through one's career or lifespan. It doesn't. It changes. So life stage is important. The nature of that guy's vocation is important. Aspirations are important. And therefore that is why all of this becomes very complex, because if we all knew this is the only thing which matters, we would have solved the problem. You wouldn't be needing
you would be out of a job.
Yeah, I would be out of a job, right? So the question is, you have to be very prudent, you have to be very insightful, and you have to be very sensible about the choices. But having said that, I believe money is important. Let's be honest. We are living in a world where money allows you to do many things today or tomorrow, and therefore it is important. Now, what is money for X may be nothing for someone else, right? For someone is dreaming in crores, someone might be dreaming in lakhs, someone is dreaming in thousands. So that is the first part. Because people are also wanting to get to certain life stages much quicker than the earlier generation, the urgency to monetize their skills, their experiences, even if it means derailment later, is almost acceptable. So I want to kind of be in a position to retire by the time I'm 40. So naturally you're sprinting from day one rather than pacing yourself. So these are realities. But having said that, I think there are a couple of things I hear from a lot of people, both in my executive life earlier and now when I'm meeting a lot of individuals across levels, across functions, across industries. One that I hear from a lot of people is the opportunity of learning. It is, I think, coming up as one of the biggest things because they all know that in a world which is so turbulent, I cannot assume I will have the same job in the same company for the next 30 years. So I need to keep my axe as sharpened. Of course, I tell them that,
skills relevant.
Are the skills relevant? Will they be relevant 5 years from? So even in the IT world, where a lot of this moonlighting discussion happened, my own thesis is if you are being asked to work in your so-called parent company, I'm not defending moonlighting for a moment, but I'm just saying on skills which are obsolete, on technology which is a little old, but they know that, the next wave of technologies would be somewhere else, and I'm not going to get that in my larger company. What will that person do? Sit back and say, one day someone will bless me and say, wow, you have ancient skills in your repertoire. No one will do that. I mean, you and I will not do it. So you say, okay, by moonlighting, I'll pick up some new skills. So that is one. Similarly, even if you're in the business of leadership, you're in the business of any function, etc., you want to learn new things. And opportunities of learning new things, whoever and wherever you get, is a very important driver. So the question to ask yourself is, are we giving as much of a learning opportunity to as many of our better people? I'm also qualifying words. You cannot do it for 100% of your people. But do you even know who are the top 20% of your talent, the 30%, right? Because you cannot do. I mean, this is the other mistake companies do. They want to do it across the board. It is impossible. You can't please everyone. So that is the second part.
Investing in
development
people,
and skilling, upskilling, retraining, possibly before that moment comes when you need that. It's also in the interest of the company.
Sure.
The third that I think is very important is what we will call the softer skills, the entire experience. This is now a big issue. People know they have more choice than they had earlier. Yes, if I don't learn here, I'll still learn somewhere else. Or I could still learn here, but I don't want to work with this manager. And the difference between so-called employer brand and manager brand, the manager brand is becoming more and more important. I don't know because that's my experience, my day-to-day.
Yeah.
So is the person treating me fairly? Is the person appreciating me? Is the person giving me feedback? Is the person a micromanager? Is the person allowing me to do a job ahead of my time, right? Is the guy giving me visibility? And given the insecurity of many, many managers, most of whom are mediocre, let me also tell you.
And insecure.
And therefore insecure, right? Because they've all moved, because the wave has got them, many of them, to those points. This experience is not happening. I've had experiences where a very high potential guy I was trying to hire once, he loved speaking with me, he loved speaking to the CEO, and then I got him to meet the manager he was to work with. And he called me after that and he says, Prabir, I did not find my manager to be inspiring enough. You see, this is the issue. So the fact is, people today you can almost do a full critique of the manager to be, right? And say, no, I don't want to work. Company is fine, but not this manager. So average managers, poor learnability, and money is important. The reason I've not talked about titles and designations is I think it's a very misplaced and misunderstood thing, because two titles don't mean the same thing in two companies, right?
Absolutely.
But to the extent that they denote learning or money or I think so. The fact is, when people start looking for monocausal explanations for attrition, they will by default get it wrong. And they have to therefore look at that.
It's a culmination. Of a
and it is possible you may not be able to meet the salary expectations of everyone. It's possible. But can you at least make the employee experience so rich, which is connecting with your earlier question on culture, that at least people feel here is a company where I feel respected. Even for $1 lakh more or $1 million more, I don't want to leave a company where there is disrespect. Now you've created a value proposition which can hold some people back. Not everyone, but some people back. But this again is a strategic choice. That do you have something which is so good in you that people will say this is a place where, and this is why
I can't get this.
I can't,
everywhere.
And money can't buy this.
Yeah.
Money can't buy this, right? So I think the trade-offs then become, then you have a ticket to play. I'm not saying you'll have a ticket to win necessarily. But the fact is, most organizations have not even thought through what is that ticket to win. So everyone is playing that average card, and average cards don't get you a winner, right? So that's the strategic problem that most companies are fighting.
Very interesting. You talked about investing in the team and individuals through and investing in their growth and development, right? Again, this is something that we are doing more consciously now. We may have been doing it sort of ad hoc and without really thinking about it this way. Or doing it where we think it benefits us, right? And not thinking about it from the team member's perspective. But for example, again, in our context, we as a restaurant, we want to empower our front of house team to speak knowledgeably about wine, right?
Correct.
So, of course, they learn a lot on the job, but, having them go and do a specific technical training course on that, which of course costs money and, it's not sort of something that's cheap, but doing that where you're like, this will give you the tools to do your job better and in turn obviously help us as well.
Right.
But it took us a whole sort of, thought process of, first of all, how many people do you do this for? Which you mentioned should be, you can't do this for everyone all the time. So, you answered that already. But I've come across this thing which it's one of those jargons as well called trap clauses, right? Where essentially where I have to see what this stands for: training repayment agreement provisions, which are basically where you are making these investments in, and these are where you're obviously spending money. Correct. It's not just the sort of the soft things, right? What is your take on that? Like, is that something that is fair? Is that something that you should as an organization consider? Or
so I'll give you my view. I don't think I would do that because I have done it many years ago. I think almost 20 years ago, and it never worked. That was a time when we were trying to get some people through CBIL certification, which I was in an IT company at that time, right? It was an expensive thing that we put people through. And we got them to sign all these bonds. First of all, we did not do it just to make them feel good or make them feel skilled.
It was benefiting you.
We did it because we thought it will help us in our business if we have this skill in-house to deliver to our clients better this thing. And now I'm talking with the wisdom of 20 years having gone past. But the other thing that I think I learned was that people did not feel great about it. They signed it because for them also it was an opportunity of learning. And it was expensive at that, I forget that, maybe let's say it was $1 lakh or 2 lakhs at that time. So even if you put 10 people through that exercise, you're spending 20 lakhs. But what actually happened? And this is the issue with any of these clawbacks that companies have, not only for training, for many other things. Today, if I want to hire someone from your restaurant, you put whatever trap, inducement financially, I'll pay $1 more. Because if I feel that by paying $1 more, I get the best guy, trained guy to come and I can open my restaurant in quicker time, I will do it. It's smart. So whether you're making your timber or you're harvesting someone else's timber is also a matter of strategy. But if you have chosen to kind of invest, do it in good faith. Make the person feel that we are investing in you. Create the moral compulsion. Because financial compulsion...
But come on, that is easier said than done.
But that's the only thing which will work. I'll tell you that for financial reasons that people will stay back. I'm not saying some people will possibly stay back, but from an assassin psyche perspective, no clawback is good enough. I mean, I've been in the business of hiring all my life, and I can tell you any clawback. The guys have promised me 2 crores if I stay with them, till 2028, let us say. I'll say I'll take over the entire thing. I'll also pay you 2 crores and 10 lakhs in 2028. Done? No issues. I have a housing loan of this kind. I'll take care of the housing loan. I'll write off the housing loan on day one. What else? See, money is the most commoditized and easiest supply today. My suggestion to clients is you cannot fight this money thing as a strategic tool. You have to be competitive, right? But the fact is, how do you sell this training program? And my personal view is there's a difference between building individual capability and building organization capacity. If I was to advise, let us say a promoter or an entrepreneur like you, I will say don't invest in the individual. Invest in organization capacity. So wine service or whatever else that is there is a distinctive dimension of the experience in my restaurants. And because it is that, all my people and as many people, so much it becomes de rigueur. I will invest, get trained people to retrain the next guy is to retrain it. So even if 5 people leave, I will still have 20 people
Absolutely.
who will, because it's organization capacity. Now, obviously, you can't have organization capacity in 30 areas. So pick what is strategically distinctive. I have in my executive life never therefore liked the concept, and I've been told by some of my CEOs and chairmen, send this guy to Harvard and Wharton. Sending 2 guys to Harvard and Wharton is not going to make a change to any organization. Zero. I personally don't agree in it at all.
So bring someone in.
Bring someone. That's exactly what I've done all my career. I'll get the same guys in and I'll get 40 people trained this year, next 40, next year, next 40. So even if some people leave, I have stock left. Second is that's the only way you are able to shore up the threshold, the baseline of whatever dimension you are doing. So to me, it's all about how you rewire your thinking. Otherwise, sending to say, we send 2 people to Harvard every year, I mean, no big deal. But I can tell you it makes no difference. So that would be my answer to. So see, so much of free counsel. I'm going to send you my invoice at the end of this talk.
Well, anyone who listens to this is gold. Look, let's look to the future. What do you think the workplace of the future will look like? And I know you said that it depends, which is absolutely fair. But even more specifically, skills. We've talked about that. What are the skills that the young people graduating from college should really be focusing? They always say, interview or hire for attitude, not aptitude, and all of that. I mean, is that fair?
I think it is fair. I believe that at the start level, your basic functional skills, to the extent that Indian education system is fairly competitive, so you can be guaranteed of a cerebral threshold baseline, depending on where the guy has studied, etc. It's true. Does it mean that this guy will be the successful character of tomorrow? The answer is no. And that is why finally I think the attitude, aptitude, the softer dimensions becomes very important. In a typical pyramidal thought process of where the guy will go to higher level of complexity, higher level of uncertainty management, leadership, I feel that you should always be looking out for people who have that potential and honing the potential of those who at least display some, modicum of that. I believe you cannot make a mule into a stallion 10 years after working. And not everyone likes the metaphor, but I continue to use it because it serves the point. I can make the guy a better mule. I can't make it a stallion, right? So you've got to pick people out very early in their careers. And I believe you need to start tracking people a little differently. Some will fall off the cliff. Some will leave you. But even if some continue to stay on course and are there with you, you've got your future value creators there. So that's from a company perspective. From an individual perspective, since it's too difficult and nor am I qualified to talk about functional skills in each area, that will vary by industry and all that. But there are certain things that I would definitely feel are very important for people to be very conscious of. One is curiosity. I would personally look for people who are curious. If you're not curious, it doesn't matter whether you're a chef or you're a nuclear scientist or you're, an HR guy. Are you curious? Are you asking questions? Are you asking questions beyond the obvious? Are you asking deeper questions? So curiosity for me is important. Second is vulnerability. Unless you're vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable, take your mask off and say, I don't know. I'm sorry I goofed up. You will never learn. You will never chance your arms. You will play safe. And in the world which is moving from VUCA to BANI, right, I think you need to be vulnerable. So vulnerability is very important. Big issue. Use the word ego in our conversation. Ego itself is a big reason why people don't want to be vulnerable. But it's okay to say, I don't know. No one expects anyone to know everything of everything. You should know who to go to. And maybe that guy is underqualified, is younger to you, junior to you. But that's the person that's your genius and your smartness. So I think I would want that as a very important part. Third, that I believe very, very strongly about that people must master as they build their careers beyond the functional side. The ability to influence non-reporting relationships. The only way you will make a difference is you can influence better than anyone else. People who are the most difficult to influence in your line of work or business or whatever.
The good sales guys.
Sales guy, but sales guys, can get...
No, I don't mean sales, literally sales, but,
But influence is very important because influence will come not only with your domain strength, but your credibility, your vulnerability, your ability to empathize, see it from the other person's point of view. So I'm just trying to use some words, but if you... Again, peel the onion, there is a lot more to it. But I think influence is a very important thing to work on. And to me, the fourth that I think is very important is courage. I don't think the careers of tomorrow are going to happen at the end of the tunnel. They'll be in the fringes. Opportunities are going to be lying dormant. Most people will go past and not pick it up. Most will want to kind of, play fair. Like when people today ask me, Prabir, how did you leave the civil service and come into the corporate world? Or how did you leave the biggest and the best of the corporates to try your hand at entrepreneurship? It is that you just want to challenge yourself. You want to say, hey, let's learn something different. Yes, there is a flip side. If I don't do well, could I financially be worse off? But I think courage is a very important dimension, and many a time we overplay fear. I think it's exaggerated because that's a societal upbringing. But I think building a sense of courage, therefore you experiment, therefore you try your doing something that you've never done before, another function, another industry. Even when you're hiring people, I'm not saying you should hire me as, of course, I can be a reasonable chef. But, maybe some things, I can't be a nuclear scientist. I understand that. But there are many jobs, especially as you go higher in the hierarchy, which is not dependent on what you've done so far. Do you know how to ask the right questions? Are you able to inspire people? Are you able to energize people?
Yeah, and you're open to learning. I mean, like you said, that you've hired people in HR from completely different
industries. And I learn. When I hired them, I learn because, otherwise I wear my blinkers. So I think these are things that I think are very important for people to keep in mind, more in terms of future-proofing their careers. I think that is what I would do. And whatever functional skills you need to learn, you of course must learn, you must anticipate. But because I use the word sharpen your axe sometime, I would also like to suggest sometimes people are busy sharpening the same axe. They don't ask, is the axe still relevant? Now, if you're trying to, one of the lines I love repeating always is, many, many companies and many, many individuals are trying to solve a pediatric problem with a geriatric solution. It will not work. But because that's what that's what has worked in the past, that's what you always did, you're stuck in 1985. You're still stuck in 1990. And that world has to end, and it has ended already. And I think if these things people can keep in mind, they will be in a far better situation of preparedness for building a more sustaining career.
Wow. True gold there. For everyone listening, actually, my entire team needs to listen to this, and I needed to hear it too. Let's go into sort of the day-to-day operational stuff, and of course, we've seen a growing use of technology in running our businesses, and particularly when it comes to the HR aspects. Is there anything that you've come across over the years? I'm sure you've also kind of started incorporating, coming across sort of tech and, any tools that you
No,
can
HR
recommend?
technology, Gauri, is exploding.
I know.
And beyond the well-known names, the meta names that almost every company has deployed. And because I also advise some of the startups in that space, I also understand competitors. So I'm going to rattle off, some names that I am very excited about, and they address different problems. For example, there is a product called Klaar, Klaar, set up by two very promising, top business school products. Most of them are set up by very bright, enterprising people. And in the work of performance management, OKRs, mentoring, productivity measurement enhancement. Brilliant tool and so intuitive. The good part today is technology has become so intuitive. You don't need to understand technology. You need to just harness technology. Then there is something called HiBob. HiBob is a very exciting HRMS platform. It's a very, very nice, interesting platform.
For reports.
No, for reports, there is something which is called Lucid Chart. It gives you the entire organogram and charting possible. See, for everything, there is an issue. There is something called Docebo, if I remember the name right. Docebo is AI leveraged learning modules almost at a click of a mouse. Can you imagine? It has reached what you need. AI is going to generate and it's able to get you. So, or there is Lena AI or Infido, which does automating of the HR help desk. And all this is beyond the standard chatbots and all of that I'm not even counting. But some of those very interesting, I advise a company called Turbo Hire, which is into absolutely amazing talent acquisition, technology enabled. It is all about machine learning. You almost it's precision bombing. Who should you be interviewing? So imagine how much of time they are able to kind of help organizations save. There is something called Tie-Dye. Tie-Dye is about automating and standardizing onboarding.
Wow.
So, you name the area of work. There are such interesting things that are happening. But again, it's back to curiosity. Are you willing to adopt? Are you willing to change? What is your decision time? Most companies have such long decision times. By the time they come, the technology has moved on. So very exciting work. And to me, it's great because it allows HR, the function, to actually focus on more strategic issues of HR, the agenda, and allow a lot of the so-called routine to be done in smarter, faster and better ways without wasting your own time and focus. So I think HR as a line of specialization, as an expertise, will become more and more a strategy function rather than an execution function. But it's a very exciting area.
This is going to be my homework for sure, and and hopefully next time we meet, I'll have actually adopted some of this. So Prabir, I've been told this, that the first high level or senior hire that any organization should do should be a head of HR. And I can see exactly why. So, this has been such an enriching conversation, and I am literally like my brain is bursting with things that, I have to think about, do, and, that I want to go back and sort of talk to my, my partner as well as the team, and this has just been hugely inspiring. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your questions. It's been a pleasure responding to your questions, and wish you all the best in your own entrepreneurial journey and through the podcast, the yeoman service you're doing to so many people who might be listening in, because you're able to get such ideas to them. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.